Okay, this is kind of a reaction video to a few selected bits of information and things coming out of IATEFL that has been really great to follow online in the last couple days. And I've got notes and keep this really quick and efficient. Teacher Development Over Time, which is the title of a book that Freeman, Woodward, and Graves have recently published, and they presented this book and talked about the ideas that they're working with right now in a talk as part of the TD-SIG showcase this afternoon, Thursday afternoon. And I just wanted to share that even before this talk, the title of the book, Teacher Development Over Time, is actually quite striking to me. I don't know if this is true for anyone else, but in a sort of subtle way, but also quite striking and not so subtle, because it carries with it this assumption that we've got time, the sort of inherent patience about this idea that I love. And of course, those three have been in this field for a long, long time, and they of course they know about teacher development over time, which is fantastic, and I can't wait to read that book. But just kind of this clanging around in my mind, this idea that, okay, teacher development over time versus the sense that the walls are closing in on ELT people all the time, that we've got working conditions so bad that they're sort of not to be spoken of at conferences, that something that has just begun to be spoken about at this conference is mental health issues that teachers deal with, kind of beyond anything that we probably recognize at all. We've just got constant burnout and a dysfunctional, impotent professional development scheme overall that is the constant subject of lots of sort of critiques and breakdowns and lots of very optimistic new ideas, but really what's going on with that? I remember reading in TESOL Quarterly in 1997, not in 1997 of course, but much later on, by Bill Johnston, an article called "Do EFL Teachers Have Careers?" And whether that's seminal or not, it's quite seminal to me, and that's another striking, a very striking title. But ultimately, what I love about what I think I'll probably love about this book, and just the title, is the optimism with all of that in mind. I'm an optimist. That's an optimistic title. That teacher development over time is something that we can really look at, that we can develop over time. And if so, we must have careers, that we must be resilient, determined to keep fixing up the messes that are all around us, and quite into it seems. And perhaps as much as I actually suspect with my optimistic mind. That's number one. Teacher development over time. Number two, Alistair Douglas, who's talked about the effectiveness of observation tasks, specifically on teacher training courses like CELTA Delta, for which he has been a CELTA Delta trainer for a long time. He gave lots of great general advice and ideas about making peer observation tasks on initial teacher training courses effective. But what I really loved is one niche-nichey thing that came up. And it came up during a question and answer period that was good 10-15 minutes. So just as a sidebar, amazing that he had that much time, and this really great Q&A session at the end, which is something that I, as a relatively new presenter at conferences, really struggle to protect from encroachment. But someone asked about the effect of having trainees use Slack, which is something he's been doing, a sort of a chat room. If you're not familiar with it, it's a version of an online chat room that people can post to. So it's a sort of a dialogue, conversation, instant upload conversational space that is generally can be used on a mobile phone or a laptop. And instead of like CELTA trainees sitting in the back of their peers' classroom as they do teaching practice and watching and maybe taking notes on a sheet of paper to share later, They type them directly into a shared chat room. They can see in real time what others are saying and thinking about the observation task. And this is actually something really, really cool, and this is something that I've seen CELTA trainers talking a lot about together online, and many trainers have been trying this out, and I've seen nothing but positive results and very interested parties either just starting out or planning to start doing this. It seems like a very promising practice, and one of those things that I hate to be missing out on, as I'm not currently a full-time trainer anymore. It just breaks my heart, and I didn't get the chance to get started with that once I had heard about it. I will maybe blog about this and something that I did do. My favorite observation tasks did approximate this in some way, and I want to talk about that later. But anyway, back to the question during the question time. Somebody asked Alistair Douglas what effect using Slack during TP had on the face-to-face oral feedback that happens in the group of trainees with the trainer later on after TP. And Alistair talked about it being quite very helpful because he didn't have to ask the trainees, so what did you think about X then? You know, what did you think about this? He already knew what they thought from reading the threads, and it kind of avoided that slightly uncomfortable reporting of opinions, and it's a bit of a rigmarole actually, and I really could relate to that. I talked about really being able to get straight to the, okay, so how can we do X or Y differently, or what can we learn from this or that? And I just loved the way that came out from the question and answer part of a session, and also the thing itself. I can absolutely see how that would have and that will hopefully have a huge impact on my training room, specifically the feedback, both during I think it could be fruitful during the session, the observation session, and in particular give you a chance to actually go further in the 40 to 60 minutes that you typically have to talk over lessons, because you've already done laid so much of the groundwork for deeper conversations about more specific issues and more timely issues. Cool. And then number 3, how do these videos get so long so fast? Something I plan to blog about more in response to this great IATEFL this year is based on Ortega's plenary, where she gave 2 examples, one of research successfully impacting teaching, and the other where an area of research that has not successfully impacted teaching in a positive way. And the first one was actually motivation, and the second one was error correction. Probably readers of this blog probably familiar because you may have listened to the talk or been there. And first reaction is, actually for me, the research on error correction is a huge, big deal, and it has a super positive effect on everything for me. Research on motivation, actually can't say that I've read hardly as much as I probably should have, and certainly not half, a quarter, or 10 or 1% of how much research I've read on error correction, which I'd rather call corrective feedback, by the way, so I'm just going to carry on like that. But so that's just my anecdotal addition to what she described there. And number 2, her putting motivation and corrective feedback right next to each other just got my juices flowing, because, so thinking back to the summary of some research on corrective feedback by Drew Fagan that I summarized on ELT Research Bites. That's a study that what I wrote was, it spotlights 2 key practices which systematically imbue classroom corrective feedback episodes with engaging positivity. And I just I'm thinking that what I really meant by engaging positivity, and probably could have written instead of engaging positivity, is motivation. And I think it's the successful practice, a sort of principled practice of corrective feedback, maintained by the teacher in the way that the teacher in that study is seen to be able to do, is a highly motivating, and it's a motivation that's an immediate, a very deep type of motivation. That's my claim. So that reminds me of the very first time, and I'm thinking about this as I'm sort of really swimming in all this IATEFL stuff, and thinking about how being online as a teacher, my CPD and a lot of experiences that are quite formative now are coming from online experiences connecting with the field and up, down, and left, right, side to side mostly, with other teachers coming online. I was thinking about the very first time that I think it was 2012, but it might have even been 2011, that I actually sort of dipped my toe into presenting and really sharing something out. I was online. It was a little 15-minute contribution to a sort of peer-to-peer webinar series thing that David Dubelbeis organized. Him of EFL, EFL Classroom 2.0 fame and English Central, that sort of thing. And my topic for that back then was, this may not be verbatim, but corrective feedback as a classroom management technique. I will go into that, and I want to kind of reanimate that whole thing. But the point being, I don't think that everyone's missing, as Ortega sort of implied in her plenary, that she's saying that the research is missing the complexity of corrective feedback, and that it should be, I can't remember the way she put it, but a sort of rich journey of professional discovery. And I love the idea that corrective feedback specifically is a rich journey of professional discovery for teachers. It has been for me. But I also wanted to mention that I think below, so to speak, the formal academic research world, there's a lot of complexity being acknowledged. Someone like Steve Brown, who was a presenter at IATEFL, has been, for just one example, exploring things outside of the formal research vein on his blog that have a clear eye for complexity, as well as high levels of teacher accessibility. Stuff is very good to read, very accessible, and most importantly, perhaps, extremely open and welcoming for teachers. See his stuff on the idea of preflection, for example, which is this beautiful, brilliant, entirely sort of the quality of those ideas is something that I don't think has any, that, the ELT journal has anything on it, or whatever. So that's my thoughts. A few of them. Thanks for watching. See you again.